Hey, shalom, shalom, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to this next episode of Reading with SHILO, man. What's up, baby? I'm SHILO. I'm out here, baby. What's up? Ready to do my SHILO Hammer Thug Thizzle. SHILO Hammer, for I have become destroyer of worlds. Hey, what up, man? We are here to pick up in chapter 5 of The Medical Apartheid by Miss Harriet A. Washington. We've been getting into, man, we are almost done with chapter 5. We're going to try to finish off chapter 5 of this episode, this show, this time. So everybody who coming in, falling in line, baby, I hope y'all warm and healthy and well, wherever y'all at. I'm out here. I feel rejuvenated by a little slumber. Yeah, so shit, man. We were getting into chapter 5, The Restless Dead. The Restless Dead is the Restless Dead is the title of chapter 5. We still got about 6 pages, or so to finish off chapter 5. Yeah, I don't know where y'all at. It's kind of cool where I'm at. Oh boy. But it's all grieving. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to get right into it. For the most part, we're gonna work our body, work our mind, and work our body. That is gonna be the regiment. That is the regiment. Body, mind, body. Body, mind, body. Body, mind, body. So we're gonna work our mind way more than we work our body. We work our body on a regular. With everything we do on a daily, we work our body for the most part. But we definitely need to exercise our mental. Ooh. Oh, come on, baby. So we're gonna start off with 25 things, man. Whatever it is that you're comfortable with doing for yourself, just get off your lazy behind and do 25 things. I'm gonna get off my lazy ass and do 25 things too, so that way I don't be fat. I'm fat. I can move whenever things that I want to do, hopefully for longer. Yeah, but that's what it is, man. Get ready. Hurry up. I ain't holding. I may have some energy. I just don't feel like doing no push-ups on live, but fuck it. We're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do my 25, you do your 25, and do whatever you need to do. Let's get going so we can go ahead and read. Let's read. Shit. Hold on. Let's get it done. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, no more, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, one more. Let's get it. All right. So that's my 25 things. I hope you do your 25 things. Make it count, man. Don't bullshit yourself. Do not bullshit yourself. All right. Give me a minute. Catch my breath. I should have grabbed a bottle of water. All right. And we're going to pick up where we left off at. The Medical Apartheid. The dark history of medical experimentation on Black Americans from colonial to the present time. There's been a lot of humbug in this book, man. Humbug that I already knew. Shit that's been passed down, throughout the years. Stuff people have been said as they, recall it in the book. People call it old wives' tales and, superstitions. But it seems that the people really had, some their fears were based in factual things, which being, a so-called black person at that time in the 1800s and, 1700s, 1800s, or whatever, as they say, your word or opinion didn't mean shit, and it didn't count. So you couldn't stop them from doing anything that they wanted to do to you. So therefore, the medical apartheid was definitely taking place. And most of the things that they did, or so far in the first 5 chapters that we've read so far, is things that still seems to go on today, which tells me they ain't got shit right. They ain't got shit right. But let's pick back up in The Restless Dead. This is part 2 of chapter 5. This will be part 2 of chapter 5. Let's get it. Let's start it up. When you come on in, like, comment, subscribe. Thank everybody who comes in and lends me an ear and lends your time. I appreciate it. I really do appreciate it. We're going to keep growing. We're going to see what we can learn and grow from in the sessions. All right. The Medical Apartheid, chapter 5, part 2 of chapter 5, The Restless Dead. In 1788, blacks petitioned the New York City Common Council complaining that medical students made regular botulism raids on the on the Negroes' burial ground when under cover of night and in the most wanton of sallies. They unearthed black bodies to mangle their flesh out of wanton curiosity and then expose it to the beasts and the birds. The Common Council did not deign to answer the petition, and the popular press showed little sympathy. And one newspaper opened that the only subjects procured for dissection are the productions of Africa. If these are the only subjects of dissection, then surely no one can object. And some sympathetic whites, notably Quakers and abolitionists, did object, to no avail. But when emboldened medical students extended their forays into white graveyards at Trinity Church and the Brick Presbyterian Church, New Yorkers objected en masse. And blacks were among the 5,000 rioters who stormed New York Hospital in the 2-day doctors' riots in 1788. That'll definitely be something good to look up. The doctors' riots. The doctors' riots? I'm going to mark it down. The doctors' riots. 2-day doctors' riots of 1788. Pillaging Columbia Medical School and assaulting physicians in retaliation for disturbing the eternal rest of New Yorkers. Well, Eris, that is part of the book. That is part of what the doctors are trying to figure out. What makes so-called blacks the blackness? What is it, their blackness? Does it run skin deep, or is it deeper than skin deep? By the 1820s, instruction in anatomy was ubiquitous in medical schools, which were Borgian. And in 1810, there were 5 medical schools in the United States, and in 1860, the nation boasted 65. And by 1890, their number had doubled. The demand for medical cadavers grew correspondingly, with dire consequences for black communities. And in 1879, 5,000 cadavers of years were procured for medical use, most of them illegally. And in the South, most were those of African Americans. Even in the absence of racial hatred, the bodies of blacks were preferred simply because they made easier targets. And no slave could withhold permission for autopsy or dissection. If a master sent a sick, elderly, or otherwise unproductive slave to the hospital, he usually gave the institution caring for and boarding the slave carte blanche for his treatment and for his disposal. No, I'm not a Muslim. Moreover, the least sensitive masters aggressively exploited their slaves' fear of post-mortem violation. And during the transatlantic slave trade, crews discouraged the frequent bloody uprisings among kidnapped Africans by dismembering their bodies as a deterrent to other African captives who believed that the spirit of a mutilated person would not be able to return to Africa. Dr. Aramis, Erasmus, that sounds like Nipsey Hussle's name. Dr. Erasmus D. Fenner also noted the effectiveness of post-mortem decapitation in controlling slaves. The Negroes have the utmost horror and dread of their bodies being treated in this manner. For the resurrection man, the black cemetery was the easiest targets. Most of the black populace could barely afford funerals, to say nothing of guards or mort safes. I never heard of that. Or mort safes, cage-like arrays of vertical iron gates that were inserted over the coffins to prevent access by grave robbers. And in 1827, the African-American newspaper Freedmen's Journal suggested an economical defense against grave robbing. And yes, that's my beard. As soon as the corpse is deposited in the grave, let the truss of long wheaten straw be opened and distributed in layers, as equally as may be with every layer of earth until the whole is filled up. And by this method, the corpse will be effectively secured. The longest night will not afford time sufficient to empty the grave, though all the common implements of digging be used for the purpose. Whites quietly acquiesced to the violation of the black bodies because they saw grave robbing as a zero-sum game. And that is, whites knew that physicians' lust for cadavers would be satisfied somewhere, and if not from black cemeteries, then from white ones. And despite guards and mort safes and the wounded feelings of white families, to ensure that the anatomy laboratories of the South or in the South would continue to be peopled with black, not white corpses, state legislatures enacted the newspaper championed a variety of statutes to validate the existing racial disparity that with regard to dissection. And in 1828, for example, the Georgia legislation, or just the stature, considered a proposal to send the bodies of executed black felons to medical societies for anatomical dissection, expressly to ensure that white corpses would be spared. And the statesman and patriot correspondent insisted. The bodies of colored persons whose execution is necessary to public security. That shit sound crazy. The bodies of colored persons whose execution is necessary to public safety. So what is the question would be, what are they doing that's so bad that is against public safety? Are they the Nat Turners? That's leading me to believe that they must be the Nat Turners. May we think be with equity appropriated for the benefit of a science on which so many lives depend, while the measure would in a great degree secure the sepulchral repose of those who go down into the grave amidst the lamentations of friends and the reverence of society. The Richmond, Virginia Whig suggested in 1838 that the city's large black population made it a likely site for the establishment of a medical school that would rival those of Philadelphia, because in Philadelphia, as every professional man versed on the subject well knows, from the almost sole use of whites in the labor of the city, the supply for anatomical and a black Richmond newspaper, the Colored Americans, quickly responded. Medical science requires anatomical subjects. It is not fitting the dignity nor the sensibilities of white men to use their dead bodies for such purposes. And black men are not everywhere to be found, but in Richmond they may be found, and it is the dignity and sensibility of a black man are of no account. And the health of slaveholders requires that they should have good physicians and articles to be forthcoming only from the medical college were where anatomical subjects are abundant. Ergo, a medical college ought to be established at Richmond. And O slavery, foul spirit of darkness, not content with gorging thyself with the tears and the blood of thy living victim, thou followest him into his grave, and there tearest him limb from limb, and riotous amid the less relics of his corrupting dust, as if thou coldest, but be satisfied with nothing short of his annihilation. Yeah. The writings of private physicians and medical schools reveal that they freely avail themselves of the bodies of blacks who came into their care. And in 1839, Dr. Harris A. Savannah lamented his failure to save a group of slave patients who had died from cholera. But within the same sentence, he comforted himself with the reflection that he would certainly have ample material with which to investigate the anatomical characters of the disease on the following day. And that same year, Dr. Edward Eve went to the grave site of a slave who had died under his care, intercepted her body, and removed the stomach before her burial to study it in a convenient place of examination. Medical journals also provide evidence of the racial disparity with regard to autopsies. Historian Todd Savitt discovered that between 1849 and 1851, fully 19 of the 24 autopsies that white physicians described in the Transylvania Journal of Medicine and in the Associate Sciences and the Transylvania Medical Journal are performed upon blacks. And this transpired in Kentucky, where the white population greatly dwarfed the black. So were all three of the autopsies on Alabamans who died in an 1853 typhus fever epidemic. And around 1850, doctors' prayers for more cadavers were answered, thanks in part to Jeremy Bentham, the British apostle of the utilitarianism, who held the laws should be predicted upon actions that produce the greatest good for the most people. For a society that wanted superlative medical care, the greatest good lay in sacrificing the bodies of people who were dead for the well-being of the living. Informed with Bentham's philosophical spirit, Northern state legislature began replacing absolute legal bans on dissection with colorfully nicknamed laws that sought to supply more bodies for dissection to satisfy the medical establishment. But these laws tended to protect the repose of the white middle and upper class populace while sacrificing the bodies of the black and poor. New York passed its Bone Bill in 1854, which gave anatomists legal access to the bodies of almshouse denizens and others of the friendless poor, who were disproportionately black. And Pennsylvania's Ghastly Act did the same in 1867. These might have to be some acts that might have to be looked up later. The Bones Bill in 1854, Bones Bill, and Pennsylvania's Ghastly Act. The Pennsylvania's Ghastly Act in 1867. Such laws also had to address petty territoriality among various medical schools. And in January of 1875, an Indianapolis newspaper interviewed a resurrectionist who confided, "Now I'm going to tell you about what I call a mean trick. A stiff had been raised about the ground, supposed to be the peculiar property of one of the colleges, and sold to another. It was much of a stiff, a poor, miserable, emaciated Negro that didn't weigh more than 90 pounds, but it made the faculty of blank college madder than hornets to think that a stiff out of their ground had been sold to a rival college." And many blacks claim that some night doctors kill the anatomical specimens. And Edinburgh's 1829 Burke and Hare affair had demonstrated that this was a real risk. Between Christmas of 1827 and October of 1828, William Burke and William Hare murdered between 16 and 23 Scottish residents and sold their bodies to anatomy professor Dr. Robert Knox for from 7 to 10 pounds each. And when they were discovered, Hare gained his freedom by turning Crown's evidence against Burke, who was convicted and hanged on January 28th of 1829. His legacy included the impious term burking, which donates a murder, usually by suffocation, carried out to effectuate a sale to autonomous. Knox was acquitted, as usually happened when physicians were discovered in collusion with body snatchers. Doctors went free, while their black and lower class Confederates were punished. In America, the 1886 burking of Baltimore resident Emily Brown has been amply documented. Brown was a poor white woman who lived in a black neighborhood, and her body sailed to the University of Maryland School of Medicine for $15 by John Thomas Ross and Albert Hawkins, business associates of Anderson Perry, the school's black resurrection man, aroused suspicions. There are no documented cases of burked blacks, but this may simply reflect the Southern social milieu of the era. There are no legally documented rapes of black women by whites in the South during this period either, but they occurred. The North shared the South's dependence upon black bodies, and medical historian David Humphrey records a widespread belief that by 1788, few blacks were permitted to remain in the grave, and as in the South, Northern hospitals expected blacks to submit to research, including autopsy and dissection, as payment for having been treated in charity wards, and all blacks were consigned to such wards. Northern schools also relied upon clandestine exports of black bodies from the South, which were only briefly interrupted by the Civil War. An industry sprang up in shipping black bodies to Northern medical colleges, and Dr. F.C. Waite recalled that many bodies of Southern Negroes were used in Northern medical colleges. A professor of anatomy in a New England medical school told me he had an arrangement under which he received in each session a shipment of 12 bodies of Southern Negroes. They came in barrels marked turpentine. And this traffic of black bodies for dissection ran in both directions. From the 1841 travel memoirs of Englishman James Silk Buckingham contains this clipping. More pork from the South. Yesterday morning, it was discovered that a barrel, which had been put into the office of the Charleston packet line for the purpose of being shipped to Charleston, contained ye bodies of two dead Negroes. The cast and its contents were sent up to the police office and placed in the dead house for the coroner. The barrel's contents were addressed to the professors of the medical school, and Buckingham added that this was the fourth such discovery that month, and that no further inquiry appears to have been made into the matter, as if it were altogether beneath the notice of white men to trace out these traitors in the dead bodies of blacks. Black graveyards were the favorite hunting grounds of northern body snatchers, and in 1829, John D. Godman, MD, wrote of how, on behalf of several Philadelphia medical schools, he had secretly paid the manager of a public graveyard for the privilege of emptying the pits of about 50 to 85 cadavers a month during each dissecting section. Damn, boy, he was getting them dead bodies. He was getting them dead bodies. It makes me wonder if like if in certain morgues today, if they still have this practice, when a John Doe or a Jane Doe, arrives and it's been there for maybe a little while, do they just write it off on the books? Does that Jane Doe or John Doe just go missing and it gets delivered, still transported in the same fashion, as it was before? It might not be marked turpentine, but hey, there's plenty of, hey, who knows? Black graveyards were the favorite hunting grounds of the northern body snatchers. And in 1829, John D. Godman, ND, MD, wrote of how, on behalf of several Philadelphia medical schools, he had secretly paid the manager of a public graveyard for the privilege of emptying the pits of about 50 to 85 cadavers a month during each dissecting session. The reference to a dissection session was pragmatic as well as academic. Before the advent of efficient preservative technology, corpses decayed quickly, and except for those corpses that were pickled in whiskey for export, bodies were exhumed during the cool of the academic year, from fall through spring. Todd Savage explains that bodies were well aware that blacks, were well aware of this morbid seasonality, as evinced by one elderly Virginia slave who, passing the medical school, shuddered and muttered, "Please God, I hope when I die, it'll be in the summertime." Yeah, my boy, they're gonna take you. They're gonna take you, man. Man, to have that thought of being taken in your grave, from out your grave, man. Newspaper descriptions of executions regularly noted that the matter, of course, the bodies of black but not white criminals, were to be dissected. And one account read, "The execution of Cook and Coppock, white men, Copeland and Green, colored, took place at Charleston, Virginia on Friday last. The bodies of Cook and Coppock were taken to Harper's Ferry in a train which was waiting at the depot, and the bodies of the Negroes have been given to surgeons and medical students." When Pennsylvania passed its Ghastly Act in 1867, it stipulated that its medical schools could use only unclaimed bodies of the poor from Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Such laws were insufficient to protect black bodies from continuing to be seized by medical schools, simply because the law supplied too few bodies to the schools. And during 1881 to 1882, the academic year, Philadelphia boasted 1,493 medical students, but only 400 cadavers. And both lawfully obtained bodies and then those stolen from cemeteries were likely to be those of African Americans. As David Humphrey observed, legislation Legislation did not substantially alter the social origins of the supply. It simply assured that cadavers would come in entirely rather than primarily from America's lowest social strata. And in 1867, an Ann Arbor newspaper reported that two colored men were caught in Chicago on the night of the 15th with a wagon in which were 5 dead bodies, which they had taken from the cemetery. They claimed to have been employed by the authority of Rush Medical College. 8 years later, the Indianapolis Herald published an interview with an unnamed resurrection man, an alcoholic physician fallen on hard times. He crowed that he sought corpses from black and pauper graveyards, and the stiffs are raised at Greenlaw Cemetery, Mount Jackson Cemetery, and Poor Farm Cemetery. So far as I know, Crown Hill, a private white graveyard, has never been troubled. Northern medical schools recognize that being unable to acquire sufficient cadavers to attract medical students could mean their dissolution. So they imported black corpses, and in 1933, Howard University's Dr. Montague Cobb, the first African-American professor of anatomy, ironically alluded that to the unconsciously egalitarian implications. In our colleges, in the anatomy laboratory, recognized in the Negro perfection in human structure, which they were unwilling to concede when that structure was animated by the vital spark. The clandestine nature of such transactions made estimating the relative numbers of such bodies difficult. But in 1935, Cobb rose to the challenge by analyzing the 2,139 cadavers that had passed through the Laboratory of Anatomy of Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio, since 1835. He showed that the bodies of whites were initially used in the Midwest, but that they were rapidly replaced by imported black bodies. Cobb found that in contrast to white cadavers, which were local, a heavy majority of Cleveland's Negro cadavers emanated from southern states: Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, Kentucky, Mississippi, North Carolina, and Arkansas. After the wartime exodus of blacks from the South, the imported black bodies were replaced by those of resident blacks, out of all proportion to immigration trends. And although there were 12 times more whites than Negro deaths, only twice as many whites arrived at the laboratory, or relatively 6 times more of the Negro dead. In the last 5 years, the proportion of Negro to white cadavers has been much greater than would be expected from the numbers of the city deaths. And Northern medical schools also employed strategies that to make the most of the black and poor white populations they had. For example, on February 20th of 1810, Dr. John Warren and professor of chemistry Aaron Dexter presented the president and fellows of Harvard University with a memorial and petition for the removal of med lec. I wonder if it's med.lec. to Boston. I wonder what it stands for. Medical lectures, maybe the removal of medical lectures to Boston, or medical something, medical lec, med lec to Boston, in which they made their cases for moving Harvard Medical School from the university's home base in Cambridge across the Charles River to Boston, where it could avail itself of cadavers from the poor black and white denizens of the almshouse. Warren successfully argued that one of the great objects of the school was to offer students cadavers for dissection, without which Harvard might be eclipsed by other medical establishments, even the remote areas of the country. Later that year, the medical school moved to Boston. Now, as slavery was abolished in most of the nation, acerbic protests and occasional riots further scared the medical establishment's relations with the black communities. And in December of 1882, screams and curses rent the airs as the Philadelphia morgue was thronged by distraught black mourners who had come to retrieve the bodies of their recently buried loved ones. They were drawn by sensationalistic newspaper accounts of an intercepted grave robbing the night before. And at 11 p.m., newspaper reporters had stopped a wagon driven by two white men, Frank McName and Henry Pellet. In the back, a black man, Levi Chew, perched on an oilcloth that hid bodies uprooted from Lebanon Cemetery, Philadelphia's African-American burial ground. And Levi Chew was the brother of Lebanon Cemetery director Robert Chew, and the bodies were hidden in a wagon bound for Jefferson Medical College. Now, Frank McName professed that for 3 years he had hauled bodies from Lebanon Cemetery to Jefferson Medical College at the behest of Dr. William Forbes, Jefferson's chief anatomist, who had even given McName keys to the anatomy laboratory for greater convenience in completing deliveries. As gatekeeper of the cemetery and the resurrection man's brother, Robert Chew was complicit and presumably received his share of the $8 that Forbes paid for each body. Now, the intercepted bodies lay in the city morgue, awaiting identification by family members, even allowing for the newspaper hyperbole of the era. The scene was a heartbreaking one, and distraught families vowed vengeance on the grave robbers, and sobs racked the prostrated old woman who had been able to bury her husband only after begging the requisite $20 for his former co-workers at the wharves. Utilizing the disquieting double standard, African Americans excused the resurrectionists and blamed the doctors. An African American minister raged against the doctors, saying they set the plot afoot and used the men under arrest as planked tools. But the laws didn't agree. A jury of 11 whites and 1 black sentenced the 3 grave robbers and the cemetery director to 10 years prison terms. Yeah, but the doctor didn't get shit. On the witness stand, Dr. Forbes admitted that he had paid the resurrection man for 150 bodies a year, but said he enforced the strict don't ask, don't tell policy concerning the provenance of the bodies. And seemingly unmindful of the irony, the Philadelphia newspaper praised his subsequent acquittal with the same fervor with which they had condemned the resurrectionists. They did chide him obliquely for having perhaps acted ignorantly or unthinkingly. And in both cases, judgments were issued along racial fault lines, not according to ethical or legal precepts. The black populace ignored the fact that the Chews were guilty of the doubly betrayed trust to people who entrusted the cemetery owner with bodies of their loved ones and to their large ethnic community. The racially imbalanced jury and newspaper exonerated the white physician and focused blame on the grave robbers. Watching the bones, man. I'm going to try to finish it off. For many, the final manifestation of medical racism is the post-mortem display of African American bodies, without their consent, stuffed, mummified, or skeletal black bodies have been displayed in doctors' offices, anatomy laboratories, museums, traveling sideshows, and even private businesses. Some libraries and physicians still possess books bound in the skins of African Americans, souvenirs that were typically bought from grave robbers. Even in death, African Americans were bought and sold. They put my Frances Oglesby, and I've heard that name before. Frances Oglesby in 2001, as she announced her suit against the Medical College of Georgia for the return of her mother's remains and $800,000 in damages for pain and suffering. All that remains of Ogilvy's mother, Bessie Wilburn, is a skeleton that has hung on display for half a century in the pathology laboratory of the same school that hid African American bones in its basement. However, Wilburn, a poor, frail African American woman who lived in Lincoln County, 60 miles northwest of Augusta, was consigned not to obscurity, but to display as an object of horrible wonder. Now, why? She suffered from Paget's disease, a bone disorder that deformed her skeleton so monstrously that she died of the ailment in 1950 at age 28. Augusta surgeon Peter B. Wright fully explored Wilburn's crippled bone deformities when he performed her autopsy, which he vividly described in a 1951 Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery article. Wright then removed the flesh from her body and reconstructed her skeleton, which he displayed at that year's winter meeting of the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons in New York City. He bizarrely arrested Boney Cage won Wright a Medal of Originality. And Wilburn's family thought she had been buried. And after Oglesby sued the MCG, eventually agreed to return Wilburn's remains and pay for their burial. But on her lawyer's advice that this would destroy evidence central to her suit, she refused. A Georgia Court of Appeals ruled against Oglesby in 2004, noting that the school had been immune from lawsuits when her mother died and that she had waited too long to sue. Wilburn's skeleton still hangs in the MCG, jealously guarded from all but MCG's eyes. Ain't that about it? Ain't that something, man? Ain't that something? But they want you to do the right thing. That's great. The people that want you to work with them don't want to work with you. The people that want you to work with them do not want to work with you. Displaying the bodies of African Americans had helped to alienate them from the healthcare system very efficiently. And an incident in the life of a Dr. Simpkins of Lewisburg, West Virginia, was offered by a local biographer to illustrate that the doctor was imbued with the spirit of research and a desire to improve his knowledge of medicine. When an enslaved African American named Tom was condemned to death for a murder in 1824, Simpkins said he obtained Tom's body by promising him all the gingerbread he could eat until his hanging. The gingerbread man, Tom. After the execution, Simpkins assembled Tom's skeleton and hung it down on his waiting room door, where, the biographer explains, it terrified patients when the wind occasioned its movements. The later detailed is telling, because Tom's skeleton is no symbol of scientific illumination. It has been transformed into a sort of medical boogeyman. And black bodies on anatomist tables, black skeletons hanging in doctors' offices, and the widespread display of purloined black body parts constituted the same kind of warning to African Americans as did the bodies of lynched men and women left hanging on trees where blacks would be sure to see them, or cut up as souvenirs of racial violence. Yale historian John Harley Warner has observed that a symbolic parallel is also clearly visible between the formal stances of the dual tableau of commemorative professional portraits of medical students and the commemorative portraits of whites celebrating the lynching of African American men and women. Warner has also noted that posing for professional portraits of anatomy laboratories with remains of dissected cadavers became an important professional ritual for medical students, a sort of specialized class portrait that highlighted their new professional and class standing and their completion of the anatomy course, an important medical rite of passage. Before 1920, the students were nearly always white and the cadavers often black. And images of African Americans who were lynched and dissected were treated alike in several telling ways. The dead bodies were often horribly mutilated. Body parts are excised and missing, and they are burned, castrated, or fresh wounds are visible. The bodies were also posed in undignified attitudes that accentuated whites' dominance over them, and the lynch was shown handcuffed, bound, hanging, gagged, and tied to stakes, and the dissected had been flayed, propped up, and played with playing cards placed in their hands and cigarettes in their mouths, posed in chairs, or dressed in outlandish clothes or hats. The dead bodies were often stripped nude, or partially so, while the revealers tend to be well, even festively dressed. The white groups project an air of jubilant camaraderie and tend to look directly at the camera in an unself-conscious, even proud manner. Oh, these some dusty foot doctors, dusty foot physicians. Souvenir images of both types were often distributed in the forms of photographs or postcards of the anatomists or lynchers with the body. Actual body parts such as fingers, ears, patches of skin, and bones were seized, sold, and collected as souvenirs. And lynch bodies and grisly human souvenirs served as warnings to blacks that whites could torture them, murder them, and defile their bodies with impunity. Any African American, literate or not, could read the same clear warnings in professional portraits of groups of jocular white physicians and physicians to be posing with flayed, dissected black remains. The disrespectful use and display of black cadavers by white medical students is a recurring motif in physicians' writings. And during the 1850s, Dr. Henry Louis Clay, a Southern physician with a literary bent, published many ruckus accounts of medical exploits by a fictional alter ego. In one tale, Dr. Madison Tensis, Lewis' protagonist, is a medical student who is secretly enraptured with the daughter of a Kentucky scion, whatever that is. What is a scion? A Kentucky scion, S-C-I-O-N. Good Scrabble word. Good Scrabble word. Skion. A skion? A Kentucky skion. Schism. A skion. A shoot or branch used for grafting. A young descendant of a family, especially of a noble family. A young descendant. Let's see. Okay. Dr. Madison Tensis, Lewis protagonist, is a medical student who is secretly enraptured with the daughter of a Kentucky descendant of a family, especially of a noble family, a Kentucky skion. Tennis ventures into the basement of his school, where he spies a group of corpses, including that of a mother and infant. I strove to depart, but something formed a bond of association between a dead nigger, baby, and myself, which held me to my place, my gaze riveted upon it. I wanted just such a subject, one I could carry up in my private room and dissect whilst I was waiting for my meals. Pooh. Something to while away my tedious hours with. On impulse, he steals the body, hides it beneath his coat, and darts into the street, where he unexpectedly encounters his intended and her father, and collides with him, spilling the dead black baby at their feet. My cloak opened as I fell, and the force of the fall bursting the envelope out in all its hideous realities, rolled the infernal imp of darkness upon the gaze of the laughing but not horrified spectators. Lewis's other disturbing tales also featured medically abused black bodies, including one in which he hides the face of a hair-lipped albino Negro in his room to frighten a snooping landlady. Even Mark Twain's classic Adventures of Huckleberry Finn includes a tale of terror in which Jim, Huck's 40-year-old black companion, is forced by his medical student owner to warm up a corpse he cannot see on a dissecting room table in a completely darkened room to get him soft so he can cut him up. And interestingly, this tale is now deleted from most editions of this book. Shit. Who remembers reading that? Such narratives unveil the social acceptability of treating black bodies disrespectfully, and the widespread understanding that the corpses used for anatomical dissection were black. In Dr. W.J. McKnight's memoir, The Pioneer Doctor, Recollections of a Body Snatcher, he regales readers with tales of his years of as a cadaver procurer, including a section entitled How I Skinned the Nigger. And one especially repugnant tale manages to combine racism with implied sexual aggression and actual medical cannibalism. His fellow medical students play a prank upon McKnight by placing a cadaver in the bed of his darkened bedroom. Sliding into bed, he feels the body, turns on the light, and sees that the cadaver is that of an African-American woman who he dubs Black Sue. Admiring neither her color nor her temperature, he exacts his revenge by cutting flesh from her body and arranging for it to be cooked and served to his tormentors. Such cadaver stories reflect the importance of enduring anatomy and dissection as a rite of passage a bonding ritual for medical students. And medical aggression against Black bodies, whether literal or literary, not only served to foster cohesion among the students, but also placed Blacks firmly outside the medical circle. Old habits die hard. Old habits die hard. Now, I might go over an hour. I'm going to go over an hour tonight. I only have 2 more pages. 2 more full pages, front and back, to read, and we're going to finish it off. I'm not going to stop anyway. I'm going to finish it tonight. We'll finish chapter 5. Old habits die hard. The use of Black bodies for anatomical dissection died slowly in the South. And as the 20th century arrived and progressed, the racial disparities in cadavers use persisted. So did the threatening display of Black bodies. And in 1912, when embattled African-American medical student Louis Tompkins Wright walked into his first day of anatomy class at Harvard, he was greeted not by his fellow students, but by a strategically placed Black male cadaver swinging in the front of the room by ice tongs inserted into his ears. Man, that's the type of shit right there that had me pissed off. Shit like that, seeing some shit like that. If I saw shit like that, that'll have me pissed off, man, for real. Have me want to do something. In 1893, but I understand, though, even though I say that, I understand that at this time, I would be unable to do anything. And if I did, I would have to suffer the consequences of doing so. And my consequences would be that I would end up most likely in the same place that body was, as a cadaver used to be dissected. And even more so, they would use me because I went against the status quo. In 1893, only 49 cadavers were procured legally at 7 Baltimore medical schools that served 1,200 students. Johns Hopkins was the law-abiding exception. The school legally procured all its 1,200 cadavers over the next 6 years. However, 2/3 were Black. In 1913, Alabama and Louisiana still lacked a legal source of cadavers. And 7 years later, Tennessee grave robbers still supplied bodies for its state medical school and for Iowa's City School of Medicine. In 1913, survey of 55 medical schools determined that a large majority obtained most of their bodies. My bad, man. My phone keep doing something. I'm trying not to let it delete y'all messages. A 1913 survey of 55 medical schools determined that a large majority obtained most of their bodies for dissection from almshouses. Other major sources include hospitals and tuberculosis sanitaria. As late as 1933, Dr. W. Montague Cobb conducted a survey for the American Association of Physical Anthropologists, which revealed that many Southern medical schools of the early 20th century still used only Black cadavers for teaching anatomy. By about 1967, in the period during which Addie Mae Collins' body was buried, 47 out of 87 schools received less than half of their bodies through volunteers and family donations. The rest were supplied by entrepreneurs. Compared to the past, in which African Americans constituted the majority of such bodies, anatomists assure us that today no such ethnic disparity exists. I don't believe it. But there is no way to prove this because no federal oversight agency exists and no ethnic data are recorded. what so conveniently, huh? So what a convenience, such a convenience. Moreover, anatomy professors involved are reluctant to discuss the provenance of the bodies because each time an expose hits a newspaper, donations fall. And in 1968, the Federal Uniform Anatomical Gift Act, UAGA, was implemented to modernize the distribution of cadavers for medical use, and each state has its own version of the UAGA statute. Today, cadavers are used not only for medical school anatomy laboratories, but also for scientific research and specialized surgical training. So the laws also govern the distribution of cadavers to mortuary schools, feet to schools of podiatry, heads to plastic surgery residency training programs, and so on. The laws that dictate the distribution of bodies still foster disparities based upon income, class, and race. And in general, the bodies that are used for anatomical dissection and research without the person's or his family's permission are today's versions of the friendless, poor, and homeless. And proportionately more blacks than whites are homeless. Another group whose bodies are relatively likely to be donated to are poor persons whose families cannot afford to bury them. And according to Todd Olson, MD, professor of anatomy at the Albert Einstein School of Medicine, these persons are more likely to be minority group members, but he could provide no statistic to support this. Thus, the disparity still exists, but in a less dramatic form. And once, black bodies in many anatomy laboratories outnumbered white ones. Now they do not. But they remain present in numbers that are larger than the representation of the population in the population. And no one has documented how much larger. But the troubling disproportionate prevalence of black body parts, such as organs, corneas, and other tissues, is subjective that blacks also make up a greatly disproportionate number of the entire bodies that are used in research. An overrepresentation of black body parts and organs in transplantation and in industry is driven by legal and medical policies such as the 1987 amendment of the UAGA, which licensed the non-consensual retrieval of body parts. Medical policies include bias on organ recruitment and human leukocyte antigen, HLA, matching requirements, which exclude more black than white organ recipients, and thus render transplant kidneys unavailable to blacks but not to whites. Legal bias also exists in the form of presumed consent statutes, which were enacted in the 1980s to increase the number of organs donated for transplantation, and which, in practice, provide black bodies without the consent or knowledge of the descendants of their families. 29 states allow the coroner or his representative to collect or harvest tissues or organs for transplantation and research via various presumed consent statutes, which presume that the descendant would want to donate his body parts. However, you see, that brings me to that thought about, the shit that they put on your damn license, man, about donating your shit, donating your organs and stuff, man. They be trying to. However, many blacks do not wish to donate their bodies and body parts, and only 5% of black Americans surveyed by DePaul law professor Michael, I think it's Michelle Goodwin, considered presumed consent a legitimate source of organs. 86% of the blacks she surveyed thought that presumed consent should be illegal. It is blacks whose organs and tissues are most likely to be appropriated via presumed consent by coroners after autopsy, because coroners autopsy the bodies of persons who die in catastrophic accidents or homicides, and during the same period that the presumed consent statutes were enacted, the homicide rates of blacks and Latinos skyrocketed. And since 1980, Black Americans have remained 6 to 8 times more likely than whites to be murdered. I am in no way suggesting that the predominance of Black body parts were deliberately engineered by the confluence of presumed consent statutes and the appearance of Black homicide victims on coroners' tables explains why their organs and tissues dominate body part scandals. For example, in 1997, the Los Angeles Coroner's Office was found to have sold more than 500 pairs of corneas a year to the Duhaney Eye and Tissue Transplant Bank. 80% were of Black and Latinos whose corneas fetched a profit of 1,000%. Theoretically, at least, persons may opt out by preventing the harvesting of their own or their loved ones' organs if they know how and where to lodge objections before death. But few people in the affected 26 states know about the laws, which means that they cannot opt out. Does your state still have this law on the book while everybody worried about what Trump doing? Trump and all these other people. Does your states still have these laws where your body and your body parts can be taken without your knowing or without your families knowing? Your loved ones, say you had a baby died, say your son, your daughter died. As soon as they died, after they could run an autopsy if they want to, and then, or at least that's what it's saying, they could run the autopsy if they want to, and then keep whatever organs they feel necessary. And fetch a profit of 1,000%. Theoretically, at least, persons may opt out of preventing the harvesting of their own or their loved one's organs if they knew how and where to lodge obligations before death. But few people in the affected 26 states know about the laws, which means they cannot opt out. And no public service announcements alert people in affected states, as they alert people of the option of organ donation and of the possibility of signing one's license in order to donate organs. The same high rate of homicide that delivers blacks to coroners' tables can ultimately deliver them to those of anatomists, because coroners also supply medical learning institutions through the provision of the UAGA. And today, as in the past, most people whose bodies are so used never gave their permission, because although informed consent remains the gold standard for medical research with living persons, decisions about the donation of one's body after death are made by others. And Olson says that in New York State, most cadavers are donated by families. Some schools, such as Harvard Medical School, prelude exploitation of any bodies by using only those of persons who donated their bodies before their deaths. But in most medical institutions, there are 3 roads to the anatomist table. One can volunteer to be dissected or used for medical education. A family can donate the body after death, or the coroner's office can give a body to a medical school if no one with the legal right to do so claims the body and takes responsibility for the cost of disposing of it. And in 1999 to 2000, half of the bodies in New York State were donated not by family, but by the coroner's office. And 8% of the bodies used in New York schools fall into the latter category. These unclaimed bodies are more likely to be the bodies of the homeless than not. Few other people remain unclaimed for the 2 or 4 months that most schools wait before using a cadaver. And estimates from anatomists leave ample grounds to suspect that African Americans still run a greater risk of having their bodies conscripted for medical demonstration, autopsy, and display. Olson explains that there are no national data describing the proportion of unclaimed bodies my bad, I lost my place, I'm sorry. There we go. Olson explains that there are no national data describing the proportion of unclaimed bodies to donated bodies. But the case of New York State is instructive because it distributes more bodies for scientists' use than any other state. And in 1999 to 2000, New York distributed 120 unclaimed bodies for anatomical dissection. 1 of every 2 bodies falls into this category. The racial disparity may persist, but still, there is also evidence of a change attitude toward anatomical dissection. We're almost done. The evidence lies not in the numbers, but in the new medical traditions. Students no longer mock cadavers by indulging in ribald poses with them, and the gruesome genre of stories medical students tell themselves about anatomy class experiences has persisted, but no longer exclusively features disrespectfully treated blacks. Most hopeful is a new tradition, the anatomical memorial service. And in the 19th century, I don't feel like that does shit. I don't even know what it is, but it don't sound like shit. The anatomical memorial service. Bitch, I don't want your anatomical. Put me in the ground. Lay me down in the ground, where my bones shall stay and there to be found. For my family to visit, for my spirit to heal. Keep me down there in that ground and don't put me on a wagon with 4 wheels. On your table I won't go. In the ground I'll stay. With all the other dead people. It's where I want to play. My bad. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. In the 19th century, the Medical College of Georgia and other schools blindly tossed the bones of African American dissection subjects into its basement. But today's medical schools provide anatomical subjects with burials. Oh, do they? Many medical schools also hold memorial service at the conclusion of each anatomy course, and family members are invited, and students offer prayers, poems, thanks, and remembrance. There are candles and tears, and one would be hard-pressed to distinguish their services from the memorials for any beloved friends or family members. What the hell ever. And that concludes chapter 5 of The Medical Apartheid by Ms. Harriet A. Washington. Chapter 5 is entitled The Restless Dead. The Restless Dead. Man, there's a lot of humbug in that chapter right there. Humbuggery. Humbug and tomfoolery by the physicians. Man, when they pulled all the shenanigans. Ooh, old hospital shenanigans. Old hospital shenanigans that were pulled. I believe the hospital shenanigans are still being pulled to this day. And as of recently, as of 2000, as it stated, these things, hospitals are still sending, or mortuaries are still sending bodies to be dissected and analyzed, and so on and so forth. You know, and bits and pieces. They're going to cut your ass up. They're going to send your feet here, your hands there, your eyes there, your head there, your stomach here. So they all can get a piece of you, Baba. My girl, my people, and so far it's still blacks and so-called Latinos are still, at the highest rates. It just, it's crazy. It's crazy to think how inferior we so say are. How inferior we so say are, but you're gonna take the organs of somebody inferior to put it in your superior body. That shit don't work. This shit don't work to me. There's no logical thought behind it. That's like me taking an old water pump. I took an old water pump. I got a brand new Cadillac, 2024, brand new, and I'm gonna take a water pump off of 55 or a 34, a 1934 Cadillac, and try to put that shit on a 2024 Cadillac. Man, it don't make no damn sense. This shit don't work. It don't work. That pump is inferior to the pump that would need or that would belong to that 2024 Cadillac. So how can you take inferior body parts, organs, eyes, fingers, toes, whatever it is, how can you take them and put them in a superior body and feel like it's going to feel like that body is going to take it? Nah. I think we take it because we are superior. I think they take our body parts because we are superior. If it was equal, then shouldn't they have an equal balance of pink people and brown people? It should have an equal balance if we are equal. And if you are better, then the better should have more people taken anyway, because the better can heal the inferior. Common sense is lost among many these days. What they say, common sense is not common. But anyway, so far so good. Still good, informative reading by Ms. Washington. She's doing a wonderful job. I am no author, and I hate to write. Oh Lord, I hate to write. But she's doing a wonderful job. She is doing a wonderful job of giving the information, which in turn leaves me, the reader, with a sense of some type of feeling. Something. A feeling of disgust, distrust, a feeling of, I knew it. I already knew that shit. You ain't got to tell me twice. A lot of those different things. But Miss Harriet is doing a wonderful job. Miss Harriet A. Washington is doing a wonderful job in the medical apartheid. Out of all the things, I wonder if this is on the reading list. Like when you read books in school, why don't nobody want to read no damn Huck Finn? Let's read the medical apartheid. Have the students read this, and do a book report on this, on things like this. That's too much like right, though, I bet. Too much like right. But once again, this has been the medical apartheid, the dark history of medical experimentation on Black Americas from colonial times until the present, by Miss Harriet A. Washington. And we are moving along wonderfully. We're doing 2 a days, which have been shown to be great. We have been consistent with them. We're going to try our best to keep being consistent with them. So come back the next episode and check us out for Chapter 6, Diagnosis, Freedom, the Civil War, Emancipation, and Findicil medical research. That will be Chapter 6. We have definitely been over our hour. We have definitely gone over the hour that I'm trying to stay reading at. I'm trying to keep an hour. But hey, it's cool. We finished off the chapter, which was the goal. Which was the goal. And the word I wanted to use, which was not objection. I'm having a damn brain fart right now. I can't remember. Which was the goal? The goal was to finish off Chapter 5. I did so. So we have reached that. We have reached the conclusion. So let's go ahead and get we did 25 to start, 25 push-ups, or whatever you want to call them. half a Tyson, half a push-up. So let's get 25 more in right quick so we can go ahead and finish off the episode, finish off the show for the day, and move forward, man. So get your lazy ass up. Get off your ass, man. If you're sitting down, get off your ass like I'm about to get off my ass. And let's do 25 somethings, man. Do 25 something. Do it. Make yourself feel it, man. Feel it. Don't cheat your body. Don't bullshit your body, man. Ma'am, man, don't do it. Don't do it, man. Let's start our habit. Let's keep the habit growing. Let's keep it going. Let's build our bodies and build our minds. That's what we're trying to do. All right. The mind is younger. 25 tonight. Let's go 25, man. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. All right. All right. I gave you one extra. Well, that concludes the reading for the day. Shalom, everybody. I'm glad to thank you for all those who stopped by. Was able to give me a shout out or a like, a comment. I appreciate it. If you ain't catch it on the back end, catch it on the back end. Leave a like, comment, subscribe. Help me reach my 1,000 subscribers, man. I'm almost there. About 200 short. About 200 short of 1,000. But I'm gonna keep pushing. I'm gonna keep pushing until I get my 1,000 subscribers and more, and get to the next goal. So, but we're moving. Like I said, we're moving along nicely. We're on chapter 6. Look how much of that book I didn't read, man. I thought this book was actually going to stump me. I really did. I really thought this book was going to stump me, hinder me a little bit because of the medical behind it. But it really has not been as difficult as I thought it was going to be. And it's turning out to be a better read than, I was about to say which way is up. A better read. When I say better, a better read than on the real side. And when I say better, I just mean as far as the ability to read more fluidly. I'm able to do so, or at least it seems like I'm able to do so within this book compared to when I was reading on the real side, which I like. I like on the real side. I like they're both on the real side and the medical apartheid, both grasp the how the times were, it grasps the ability to maneuver freely or not, and the consequences of not doing what the so-say people in power would not have you do, whether it be, death, jail, dissection, and experimentation. You can't do nothing. You couldn't do nothing back then. You couldn't really be funny. You couldn't be bad. You couldn't. Oh, it's a thin line. Between love and hate. Oh, it's a thin line, boy. It's a thin line with the pink people. It's a thin line between love and hate. Ooh. Yeah, but anyway. And these books are showing how thin that line is, man. These books have definitely been showing how thin that damn line is. It's very thin. Very walking on thin ice. But shit, man. Hey, still was a good read today. So we accomplished. That's the word. We accomplished the goal. We accomplished the goal. I think that might have been the word. We accomplished the goal, which was set before us. We worked our body. We worked our mind. We worked our body again to leave out. So, man, we're gonna stop it there. Until next time, man. I appreciate everybody. Catch me on the back end if you didn't see it all the way through. Catch it live on the back end once it upload. And catch it next time, the next episode, which will be Lord Spare Life later on today. Later on today, we'll come back and start off chapter 6, which will be the diagnosis, freedom, the Civil War, emancipation, and fin de siècle medical research. So we'll keep pushing on that. But till next time, shalom, everybody. I want to hope y'all have a wonderful evening, wonderful night, wonderful time. And I will keep doing my part. SHILO, destroyer of worlds. And I'm going to destroy one world at a time by reading one book at a time, baby. Oh, man. And see what we can learn and grow from in each one of these books that I use to destroy the world. So, man, one book at a time, one session at a time, one episode at a time, one page at a time, one chapter at a time, man. Here a little, there a little, till we find what we can find between the lines that we can learn and grow from, so we can go ahead and succeed. And we can apply it to our lives to help make us better today and tomorrow, for us and for those that follow us. So shalom, everybody, man. Catch y'all tomorrow. I'm out. SHILO. I'm out, you.